Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning. Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting you live from Austin, Texas. 17th of January, just coming out of that very interesting and deep new moon in Capricorn. It's no longer balsamic. Let's get it on. We can ride the energy and the wave of the new moon here for the next couple of days, even as it moves into the potentially more positive sign of Aquarius. There's a lot to be learned with Saturn and Capricorn, and we're just getting started. We're just getting our feet wet, as it were. We're only 2 weeks into the year, and roughly, 3 weeks now? Getting close to being a month. On the 21st, it'll be a month since Saturn went into Capricorn. And the effects are startling just from the gate. I've been incredibly busy over the last few weeks, and Saturn's transiting my second house. So I'm going through my Saturn return, my second Saturn return. I hope it's better than my first one. I think I fumbled the ball in the first one. Yes, these things happen. We are not perfect. We are Devo. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about what happened in Hawaii, which I haven't really touched upon a whole lot. Only because sometimes there are events and you just don't want to jump in right away. You don't want to pile on with the fear, the frenzy, the confusion. You don't want to add to that stew. So you wait for it to settle a little bit and try to come at it from a bit of a different angle. And as the dust settles, then there's an approach to be made. And I've gone head first into things, and sometimes they work, and there's a time where it's important. And there are other times where it's also important to sit back and then assess the situation and bring in some analysis and some thoughts around the whole thing. And that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to talk about the event from the position of trauma and triggering trauma, and what we're going to have to do ultimately to be able to get through this time. And what I'm going to talk about today may challenge you a bit. And it may challenge your sensitivities and sensibilities. Last night I was on a streaming podcast with Stephen Kelly, who's a really interesting guy, and I want to bring him on the show. And I was talking about this phase that we're in with Saturn and Capricorn, and ultimately this is the sort of the strange lesson. This is the dark magic in a lot of ways. We have to learn the lesson of the quote unquote controllers, the people who have literally built Western civilization, which is the apex of Capricorn on the planet. The giant towers with gleaming spires thrusting themselves into heaven, penetrating the sphere where theoretically the gods descend, right? This is the apex of Western culture and what it has ultimately manifested as. Of course, we have the brand new tower in Saudi Arabia, which comes online in 2020 as well. 2020 comes online. So this is our lesson. You know, we literally have to study the sociopaths. We literally have to understand their architecture, their social architecture, and their mechanisms. And I know this is going to sound maybe offbeat or crazy to you, but we have to integrate some of them into our lives. You know, it's kind of like when Elon Musk said, well, in order to beat AI, we've got to incorporate AI. So we've got to have a better AI than AI. I was like, oh, okay, I guess. It's kind of like that, but not quite. This is an interesting time because we have to learn these lessons in Saturn and Capricorn. We have to learn them fast. We've been kind of on this track. We went through the truth track with Saturn in Sagittarius. The hard truths. There's some hard truths that came down with Saturn and Sagittarius. Now it's no longer about, okay, we know enough. I mean, we know enough. We've seen, we've looked down into those dark rabbit holes. The pedophilia rabbit hole. The human sex trafficking rabbit hole. So this has been happening since Saturn in Scorpio. This is when it was initiated. We've had 6 years of being taken into these places. And if you think about it, like, I used to have this discussion in my head and thinking about what would happen if everybody got red-pilled at once, just like Neo in the Matrix, and you saw everything. I mean, it would be horrific. It'd be totally horrific. I mean, if people really saw what was going on, like, they wouldn't be able to stand the visuals, and not just the visuals, but the actual feeling of these events. That is the horror that exists in the dark underbelly of this planet. So what's happened is we've been stepped. I guess you could say we've been stepped up so that we can actually handle, that the collective can handle these dark truths. And you can see it. It's been moving steadily along so we can wrap our heads around these things so that they're not as shocking as it would be as if we just had them completely revealed automatically and immediately. And there will be more. You can count on it. There will be more. So there's a process going on here. Now, one might say that we become desensitized to it. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think this is a fairly new opening, and at a level that we've never quite experienced. And we can thank that for the internet, which is both positive and negative. The internet is an amazing tool, and it's also a cage, right? Which is part and parcel of our times. If you look back into the 1980s and the 90s, and we saw the milk carton kids, remember that? What a scene that was, man! You put these kids on milk cartons. So you're a kid, and you're sitting there, and you're eating breakfast. You're having your Cheerios or your Lucky Charms. By the way, Lucky Charms, most disgusting cereal ever. The little tiny marshmallow things, those were the little nuggets that you were desperately looking for in the Lucky Charms, because they're going to get a little, there's that sweet spot between sort of the dehydrated marshmallow that it was and the reconstituted marshmallow it becomes with the milk. And if you waited till it was too soggy, those little tiny Lucky Charms would get almost like gum. You get stuck between your teeth, right? So you'd want to get them just so that they're like that little tiny, tiny crunch, but not too much where they're still in that, dehydrated, chalky state. But then the rest of the Lucky Charms, whatever that stuff was, it was like, it was like eating, bits and pieces of compacted grocery bags. 50% cellulose and 50% whatever they were passing off as wheat. It was a disgusting cereal. Some people really like it. Not me. Anyway, so you're this kid and you're sitting at your table in the morning at breakfast, and there's that milk carton sitting there on the table because you know you're going to have probably more than one bowl of cereal. And this is not the 1950s where June Cleaver pours the milk in a glass pitcher. And that's just sitting on the table. No, that's not happening. So you're sitting there and you're eating your cereal and you look at these kids. And you're like, what is going on here? Mom, what's the story with this kid? Well, sometimes bad things happen to children. And these children have gone missing. And, what's going on in your head? Now, after a while, you may become desensitized that, there's another kid. But here you are. You're having this moment, and you're eating, right? You're eating something. And you're taking something in, and you're taking that image in. You're taking that experience, and whether it's real or not, in most cases, it's probably real. And so you're literally like eating this fear at the breakfast table. And so it was a really insidious kind of program, if you think about it. It was a totally insidious program. It was a whole generation of kids that were raised on that. That was, I was a bit older than that. And so when these and by the way, I stopped drinking milk. I stopped drinking milk when, let's see, I was about 21, roughly 20, 21. I had allergies, and I realized that milk was not my friend. So that was kind of out of my zone, but there were another generation of kids growing up in the 80s and the 90s that sat down with these milk carton kids every single day. It's a form of trauma and a form of triggering and a form of programming. So we've been in this place now where we're getting, I wouldn't say more accustomed, but in a lot of ways we're getting initiated into these very dark spots in the human condition. And it's happening slowly but surely, slowly but surely, slowly but surely. So that's part of the awakening process. It's part of the awakening process. But here we are now, Saturn in Capricorn, and I can't, I'm not going to mince words here, that there are and have been programs in place for a very, very long time. And those programs are out there to essentially mess with you, create fear, traumatize you. I mean, this has been happening for a very long time. But it got ramped up post 9/11. 9/11 was the big fear bomb, huge fear bomb. And then we've had little fear bombs along the way. You know what they are. Boston Marathon, Miami Pulse nightclub, so on, so on, and so on. So we have these events that continue to trigger us and to traumatize us and to keep us in this light state of fight or flight. And this is ongoing. And this is one major portion of control. And here we are with Saturn in Capricorn, and part of what we're going to see during this time is we're going to see all the chips being moved in during the next 3 years. Now, of course, there's always going to be some level of deviation and some level of the program not always going according to plan. These things do happen. So it's not as if there's going to be some, perfectly architectured moment as that's going to unfold, and all of a sudden we're just going to be dancing to their tune. I mean, these things do happen. There are glitches, as they say in the Matrix. And if we're coming around and working with this potential, this pre-Kennedy timeline, which I talked about last week, there's some interesting things in the offing. It's kind of like that was just like a kind of another Cuban Missile Crisis that we experienced in Hawaii. Am I right? I mean, if you were living in Florida during the Cuban Missile Crisis, probably very similar to what happened. So again, we're dealing with these kind of Cold War themes and memes that have been circulating ever since Saturn did go into Sagittarius. And we've looked at the Saturn and Sag time, and every time Saturn's gone into Sagittarius, there's been interesting action with Russia, which is theoretically our global counterpart when you factor Gemini on the other side of Sagittarius being in the equation. So we've been dealing with these Cold War themes and memes, and they have not gone away. They have not abated. And North Korea is the latest threat. You know, back in the day, it would have been considered a communist threat. And so therefore, we had to stop communism at every single turn. Meanwhile, in our own country, the communists were taking over the universities and the university system. While we were looking abroad in places like Vietnam, Cuba, Angola, our university systems were infiltrated and taken over. It's true. It's absolutely true. So what we saw in Hawaii was an absolutely egregious act of mass trauma and collective trauma. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play you 6 minutes of reactions of people in Hawaii to give you a sense as to how they felt and how their reality was wired during this period on Saturday, which was, in my estimation, an absolute and utter act of cruelty. It wasn't a mistake. There's no mistakes. All right, let's play this out here. Here we go. You're going to listen to this. It's about 6 minutes, and we're going to resolve this. I'm going to open it up, and it's going to be resolved. So just hang in there. I'll do my best to nav through this, so you won't be lingering with the terror and the fear and the anxiety that these people have experienced. All right, here we go.
There was panic in paradise.
All personnel shelter immediately.
Just after 8 a.m. in Hawaii, pandemonium in paradise. Hysteria triggered by a false alarm. The terrifying message screamed across cell phones throughout the state. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill.
An accidental alert went out across Hawaii urging people to take shelter due to an incoming ballistic missile. The false alarm was eventually called out, but not before Hawaiians and tourists started scrambling, even saying their goodbyes.
Cell phone signals here were absolutely overloaded as people called their loved ones to say goodbye as others ran for cover. It was a chaotic and confusing scene and a place known for its tranquility.
The emergency alert caused pandemonium when it went out to cell phones this morning across the islands, and it did not mince words. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, it said. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. The false alert also went out on local TV.
The U.S. Pacific Command has detected a missile threat to Hawaii
and prompted evacuation announcements.
Please report to the lobby to receive direction to the basement.
Desperate parents put their children into manholes. Terrified families huddled in closets. Others shared what they thought could be their final goodbyes.
I just wanted to know that I love you guys.
We thought this was it.
Laurie Callie's and her family ran to their basement for cover.
My 95-year-old mother, who we were not going to say anything to until we had all the information, who lives in a retirement community here, called us on the phone and she said, I can't get on the floor. I can't get on the floor. And she survived Pearl Harbor.
That terror soon turned to anger.
Heads better roll on this one.
Seeing people starting to run.
The hotel staff came and told my parents, seek shelter, you only have 12 minutes.
The mistake was part of an early warning system put into place amid rising tensions between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Less than 24 hours before the false alarm, we were given an exclusive tour of the room it was triggered from because of the push of a wrong button inside this bunker.
If a nuclear missile is launched from North Korea, that's where you're going to find out?
That's right. These are state warning officers. They'll receive a call from the Pacific Command on a secure line and make a decision to activate the statewide siren system.
Where's the phone?
It's right here behind us.
Saturday morning, that phone never rang, and there never was a signal from the military to sound the alarm. But the alert went out anyway. It took 38 minutes for a correction to be texted out, twice the time it would take for a missile to reach Hawaii from North Korea, and more than enough time to terrify people across the state.
We were all sort of out here on the beach, just kind of hanging out, minding our own business, enjoying the vacation, and then all of a sudden everybody started getting these alerts to their phones saying, "This is not a drill, seek shelter immediately, a ballistic missile is heading toward Hawaii." So immediately everybody's turning to each other, asking questions, wondering what is going on. Some of us took to Twitter right away to see if we could get some answers, and really all you would see is thousands of people living here in Hawaii wanting answers and getting nothing. At that point, the lifeguards on the beach then also started making announcements telling everybody to go and seek shelter. Now, I'll just flip this around right here. This is the beach that we're at, and you can see there aren't really a lot of people on here. Normally around this time, there are way more. It's packed with people and umbrellas, and really this is probably a result of the alert that came through here.
So an alert, as we showed it to our audience at home, saying that there was an incoming missile, that people should take an immediate shelter. But again, this was a false alarm. This has just happened. It wasn't real. It was a false alarm. I imagine a lot of tough questions will be asked next.
Oh, a lot of questions, because, you know, Hawaii has been preparing for this for some time, the threat of a ballistic missile from North Korea. People who live on the island are aware that, you know, warnings would be going out on occasion, but those warnings would be drills, and it would be clear that they were drills. In this case, it said this is not a drill, you need to take shelter. So you can imagine people have a lot of questions here. There are also a lot of Canadians on the island of Maui, a lot of Canadians who are unaware of the preparations that have been going on here. So a lot of them are very confused.
Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz tweeted, "There is no missile threat. It was a false alarm based on human error." CBS News spoke to him on the phone.
Regardless of whether it's human error or a computer glitch or a hack, whatever it was, it's totally unacceptable, and there needs to be a better accountability.
It took 38 minutes for emergency management officials to correct the mistake.
Governor David Ige took responsibility.
Today is a day that most of us will never forget, and many in our community was deeply affected by this, and I'm sorry.
An apology from officials here for a system designed to save lives, instead turning them upside down.
Willie, in the wake of this false alarm that happened during a shift change in a routine test, the governor announced he is suspending the missile early warning system tests until further notice. And from this point forward, there will be 2 people at all times responsible for sending out alerts like the ones that terrified so many.
So there you go. There's a bit of a compilation of the information associated with what happened in Hawaii. My sense is that the system was likely hacked. I don't think there was human error. I don't think somebody pressed the wrong button during a shift change. I think it was penetrated and then activated. That's my sense. And at that point, they didn't know what to do, and it took them a while, because I think running a test drill and actually doing the sending out the actual signal, distress signal, probably is 2 different things. I mean, it's 2 different things, obviously, because one is a test and one isn't a test. But I would also assume that once you're locked into the non-test, there are probably different parameters to shut that thing down versus the test, which is, you know, probably easily shut down. Right? There's more. I'm assuming that since it's a test, I could be absolutely wrong, but since it's a test, I'm sure that there's probably more easy and immediate oversight and being able to overwrite that versus an actual incoming missile threat. So it'd be great to have some clarification of clarity. What's really interesting, if you look at those times that the tweets went out, or it came out over across phones. There are 2 times. They keep showing 2 different times. One is 8-7 and the other is 8-8 or 808. And there is a Mars-Saturn conjunction at 8 degrees Capricorn on April Fool's Day. Just remember that. Mars-Saturn conjunction on April Fool's Day. It's, 3 months out? January, February, March. So we got to go through, let's say February, March, April. So roughly 2.5 months out. And I've been talking about that day, that Mars-Saturn conjunction. 8 degrees, 8 degrees. And that was the actual time. 8/7, 8/8, 8/08. 8/7 is also going to be the Mars-Saturn conjunction. It's just more exact on 8/08 or 8/8. So my sense here is this was a hack job. Now, you would say that, okay, well, all right, maybe it was just one, even if it was human error, it was just one isolated, really bad event, right? But days later, they also had an incoming missile alert in Japan. And these are the two areas that are in the target zone or the target range of North Korea. So they're literally watching how people react. You don't think there were people on the island taking notes? You don't think that there were people that were looking at all the tranches of information, cell phone data, text, emails? You don't think there are people going over video cameras and footage and watching what people do and how they react to the situation? Of course they do. So it was theoretically an opportunity to see how people will react in a crisis like that. But it was also a traumatizing moment. It was a moment where everybody on that island was literally pricked with fear. And in a lot of ways, this is symbolic of where we are and where we've come from and what we've been subjected to. It's almost like a form of bullying, to be quite honest with you. And I think people are, and we've talked about this before, we're in the process of waking up. But how do we deal with this? By the way, Tulsi Gabbard was her typical superstar. I really like this woman. Not one person sitting in the in the White House can change anything. I mean, that's not I just don't think that that's going to happen. So looking at these people as if they're saviors and superstars that are going to turn the tide simply by the force of their will and the conviction of their truth, I think is a little Pollyanna and a little misguided, although they can be very, very inspirational and they can move people to action if they're open to it. I just want to read you this real quick here. This is about Tulsi Gabbard. And let's actually just play this. I think I can get this to play. And this is her response to what happened in Hawaii.
Democrat and Republican administrations for decades, going back over 20 years, failed to recognize the seriousness of this threat, failed to remove it. And we know that North Korea has these nuclear weapons because they see how the United States in Libya, for example, guaranteed Gaddafi, we're not going to go after you, you should get rid of your nuclear weapons. He did. Then we went and led an attack that toppled Gaddafi, launching Libya into chaos that we're still seeing the results of today. North Korea sees what we did in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, with those false reports of weapons of mass destruction, and now seeing in Iran how President Trump is decertifying a nuclear deal that prevented Iran from developing their nuclear weapons, threatening the very existence and the agreement that was made. So yes, we've got to understand North Korea is holding on to these nuclear weapons because they think it is their only protection from the United States coming in and doing to them what the United States has done to so many countries.
Was it a mistake for the United States to take out Gaddafi and Hussein?
It was, absolutely.
Congressman Gabbard.
How about that? How about that for a voice of clarity? Tulsi Gabbard, who actually served in the military, she's interesting. She's a Hindi. She's born in American Samoa. She basically laid it out there. She laid it out there. Well, look, there's a whole, school and theory that nuclear weapons don't exist, which I may even entertain, by the way. I might even entertain it. But let's just say they do, just for the sake of argument. And Kim Jong-un has them. That's his ace in the hole. And she's absolutely right. I mean, if he's got any kind of perspective, he's looking around and he's seeing what happened. Exactly what she said. What happened to Gaddafi? He got rid of his nukes and boom. They went in, they leveled Libya and killed him, and now look what we have there. It's a mess. Same thing, exact same thing with... This woman's got some insight. Put her up against, nutty Nikki Haley, which is interesting because they're both Hindis. They're both Hindis. It's like these two women who have, in a lot of ways, diametrically opposed points of view. I really like Tulsi Gabbard. She's an Aries, by the way. I believe her birthday is April? Is it April 15th? I know she's an Aries. So she understands these things. She's served in the military. She's been overseas. She's been there firsthand. She went to Syria. She reported that the United States was backing ISIS. I mean, what more do you want? We have an elected official going to a place like Syria and breaking the news. Hey, we backed them. We created them. And of course, the mainstream media just turns its head because they're absolutely, utterly controlled by the same people that likely pulled the missile prank. Just keep that in mind. So we have to get to this point now where it's difficult for me to say this because I'm not promoting that you become a sociopath on the same level as the culture or the people inside the culture or the deep state or who use whatever, or the bankers. I'm not promoting that, but we have to at some point understand their game, and we have to be able to be immune to their game. Now, one could say, well, we'll be immune to it because of love. Love, 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 love. Okay? I think that should enter into the equation. But with Saturn and Capricorn, I think we're going to have to learn how to be hard asses. We're going to have to learn how to be able to drop a lot of our sentimentality. Doesn't mean we completely divorce ourselves from the Cancerian, organic, analog backdoor. We can't do that because when we do, then we become them. We become them. So we have to hold on to it. But at the same time, we're going to have to strengthen our Capricorn and our Saturnian immunity. We have to become wise like serpents. And if we want to get through this time, we're going to have to figure this shit out, and we're going to have to move past some very personal material in a lot of ways. We're going to be forced to grow very quickly. Not everybody gets a medal. Not everybody's a winner. Not everybody can be president of the United States. That's the baseline, and we build from there. We build from there. There's a scene, and I'm going to play this scene. There's a scene at the end of Apocalypse Now where Marlon Brando, Colonel Kurtz, is talking to Willard, played by Martin Sheen. And he talks about the horror. The horror. And he talks about how he's witness to this level of commitment that is liberating in a horrific kind of way. And I think it's an appropriate scene because if you understand what he's talking about, you'll understand the level of depravity and darkness that we're dealing with. And that they have no problem whatsoever with dispensing their version of horror, whatever that is. I mean, for those people in Hawaii, and you can say it was just a glitch, an error, whatever. It's, you know, if that's how you choose to view that incident, fine. I find that when we have both incidents in Japan and Hawaii, all of a sudden now it becomes a little bit more interesting and less of a kind of bad operating system or human failure. And those people went through horror. For about 38 minutes, they went through horror. Thought, this is it. This is it. So without resorting to becoming absolute sociopaths or psychopaths, we have to, at some level, understand the psychology behind what happens on this planet and the absolute ruthlessness that is associated with that. And that we have to approach it in a way where we are not closing our eyes. This is it. This is the time for us over the course of the next 3 years. And right now, in the first decan of Saturn and Capricorn, we literally have to get tougher. This is we all have our individual lives and our individual trips, and some of this can be transferred over into those lives and experiences, and our lessons, and our challenges, and our struggles. And and I'm doing the best that I can as well to live this as a operating principle in my life. It's not easy, especially when we are looking for emotional support and connection and love and all those things, which are really, really important. But at times, there is also a need and an opportunity to grow into a level of awareness that is a bit more steely and a bit more, how do we say this, less reactive. Less reactive. So this is an opportunity for us to do that this time. All right. So what I want to do is I want to play this clip from Apocalypse Now, and I'm going to come back, and then we'll round the show off. It's about 4 minutes long. You have to listen. If you haven't heard this, you have to listen, because Brando is mumbling quite a bit. But it's one of the most brilliant scenes in American cinema. And I really feel like it's Brando at his absolute and utter peak. They couldn't have found a better actor to portray Kurtz. So let's get in this. This is the horror scene from Apocalypse Now. And then we'll come out of it and we'll talk about it. And we'll wrap things up.
I've seen the horrors that you've seen. But you have no right to call me a murderer. You have a right to kill me. You have a right to do that. But you have no right to judge me. It's impossible through words to describe what is necessary to those who do not know what horror means. Horror. Horror has a face, and you must make a friend of horror. Horror and moral terror are your friends. If they are not, then they are enemies to be feared. They are truly enemies. I remember when I was with Special Forces, seems 1,000 centuries ago, we went into a camp to inoculate some children. We left the camp after we had inoculated the children for polio. And this old man came running after us, and he was crying. He couldn't say. We went back there, and they had come and hacked off every inoculated arm. There they were in a pile of little arms. And I remember I cried, I wept like some grandmother. I wanted to tear my teeth out. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I want to remember it. I never want to forget it. I never want to forget. And then I realized, like I was shot with a diamond bullet right through my forehead. And I thought, my God, the genius of that. The genius, the will to do that. Perfect, genuine, complete, crystalline, pure. And then I realized that they were stronger than we, because they could stand it. These were not monsters. These were men, trained cadres. These men who fought with their hearts, who have families, who have children, who are filled with love. But they had the strength to do that. If I had 10 divisions of those men, then our troubles here would be over very quickly. You have to have men who are moral, and at the same time who are able to utilize their primordial instincts to kill without feeling, without passion, without judgment. Because it's judgment that defeats us.
That's the horror scene from Apocalypse Now. It's a bit extreme, I know, and I'm certainly not advocating killing without judgment. So let's be very clear about that. Let's be super clear about that. That's not at all what I'm advocating. What I'm talking about, what I'm trying to bring up here with this clip, is the type of commitment that Brando is talking about that absolutely pierces the armor, the tank armor, like an anti-tank missile, right? Or an anti-tank missile grenade fired off of a rocket launcher. And what he's talking about is a type of commitment, a level of commitment that just pierces the facade of this system of control, which would be like theoretically the tank. And while we don't necessarily have to go out and do any of these things at all, it's that kind of level of commitment that we're going to have to at least wrap our heads around, because we have to understand what we're dealing with. You know, we're dealing with people that essentially hacked a system, and I'm going to go on record and say hack this system in Hawaii so that people running around the island like they're absolutely, in a state of terror. Moral terror. This is exactly what Brando was talking about. Moral terror. And this is not an easy conversation to have, especially in the morning. You want to have light, convivial, I can, tell some jokes, but, we're in a very serious kind of Capricornian phase. And I just wanted to open this up. Because at some point in time, we're going to be done with this. We're going to be done with the pictures of the kids on the milk cartons and the incoming threats and all this bullshit that we were subjected to from the outside. And it starts right now. It starts every moment. Now. And it's not warm and fuzzy. It's not Pollyanna. It is clear and lucid and stark and liberating when you get right down to it. So, as we move into this next lunar phase and we're getting ready to move out of Capricorn and moving into Aquarius, I think that we're in a cycle now where we're thinking about the kind of world that we want to live in, and that's going to occur when the sun moves into Aquarius. It always does, and so we get to wrap our heads around what it would be like to live in a world where people actually treated each other really well. People treated each other respectfully. People had a real sense of community. What would that world look like? It certainly would look a lot different than the world we're living in today. So we get to have those kinds of conversations, those kinds of dialogues, and we get to look at all the other stuff that goes along with Aquarius, AI, and the transgenderification of the species and all that stuff. That would be good. But there's also a real spirit of brotherhood and fraternity and accord that is associated with Aquarius. So we'll have some positive conversations. We'll have some interesting dialogues. We can set our intention for the kind of world that we want to inhabit. Do you want to live in an Agenda 21 world, Agenda 2030 world? Is that the version of Aquarius you want to live in? Where you don't get to drive a car, you live in a 200 by 200 foot apartment, and you get a universal wage, but you've got craft beer and espressos, 10 floors below. Is that the kind of world you want to live in? Is that your version of the world that you want your kids to live in? It's on its way. It's already happening. You can see it in Austin. Austin used to have just a basic kind of, southwestern skyline. One of the highest buildings in the city was the Capitol. And then now we've got these stack 'em and packers, man. And Congress Avenue has now become the 10th most expensive avenue or street in the United States. Anyway, that's that is the program for our future. And if you want a different kind of future, you better start thinking about it, and you better start mobilizing towards that end. Okay, so maybe a little bit heavy today, but it's okay. It's all right. It's good to get down into these spaces every now and then and blow some of the carbon out. And at the very least, you'll begin to think about what I'm sharing with you. And it's not about becoming hard. We don't want to become hard. We need that pliability. We need that empathy. And we need some softness, but not at the expense of understanding what we're up against and how to deal with it. Whether it's big pharma, whether it's big agra, whether it's big business, we can put nice blankets over these entities so that we can approach them with some kind of impersonal or depersonalized relationship and context, if that's what you need to do. All right, that's about it for today. Hang in there, stay strong, stay supple. Stay in touch with your empathy. Don't lose it. But at the same time, we're in the Capricorn learning curve. So you better get wise and learn what you can. And at certain times, man, you're just going to have to steel yourself. Say, this is it. This is where it's going. And this is the world that's coming. And I either have to conform to it and say yes to it, or if I want something different, then I'm going to have to, take some Capricornian responsibility. All right, there you go. I'll be back. What's today? Wednesday. I'll be back 24 hours from today. So you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step on what's possible. What do we got here? Any messages? We got one message. And oops on the drop down menu. Give me. And oops on a drop down menu. Give me a fucking break. Oh yeah, that's Steve. Yeah, Steve Crimmy. He's commenting about what happened in Hawaii. And oops on a drop down menu. No, there is no oops. My sense is that I don't think they instructed some drone inside that building to go ahead and run that thing. What I think happened is somebody got into the system, and then once they got into the system, there's no override for it because it wasn't just one of their drills. That's my sense, my 2 cents. I could be absolutely wrong. Maybe the guy's on the take. Who knows? Maybe he's part of some secret group, Spectre, and push the wrong button. Anyway, all right. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and keep the faith. And let's grow into some Capricornian maturity. I'm doing my best. I'm going to do my parts in my own way.